So how's it going, guys? This is part 2 of my 3-part series on Alan Turing. In this part I'm going to be talking about the Turing Test, kind of explaining what it is. That should be pretty quick. Then I'm going to move into more what I think about it, how it's being used, and why it's kind of iffy. You'll see anyways. Yeah, so part 2 is this. Part 3 will be coming up. It's on the Turing machine. That's more into the computer theory side of it. Expect that soon after this video. I'll put a link to it here. So you can click on it, and yeah, if it's not up, it'll be back soon. Anyways, Turing Test. So what is it? Let's get going. So sort of my whole thesis to this talk we're going to be doing is that the Turing Test is kind of inherently flawed. The reason for this is basically Alan Turing didn't, come up with this test to be rigorous and have strict guidelines. It was more of a philosophical point, or just a thought experiment. That's kind of what he was trying to get forward. Basically, he was saying that, like duck typing and programming, if you're familiar with that concept, basically if there's an AI that can think like a human, talk like a human, can compose sonnets like a human, and understand at least in some way like a human, then we might as well call that thing a human. Alright, so what exactly is the Turing Test? Well, in the 1950s, digital computers were really just beginning to roll out. There were only a couple dozen in the world. They were really unreliable in terms of their vacuum tubes burning out. And thanks to Moore's Law, their combined computing power would be trumped several times over by a Raspberry Pi. And yet, despite being in this primitive state of computing, people were already beginning to think about the day when computers might become sentient. One of these thinkers, the man we talked a little bit about, was Alan Turing. In 1950, he published a paper titled Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence. In it, he postulates an answer to the question, when will we know that computers can think? So what Alan Turing came up with was a test called the imitation game. And it works as follows. So imagine there are 3 rooms completely isolated from each other, each with a computer in it for typing messages to the other computers in the other rooms. In each room there is one person. We will call these 3 A, B, and C in each room respectively. Person A is a man, person B is a woman, and person C is playing the role of the interrogator, who could be of any sex. At the beginning of the game, person C does not know who A and B are, but must determine which is the man and which is the woman by typing messages to them. Now it's B's job in this game, the woman, to help the interrogator to make the right decision, and it's A's job to try and confuse C into making the wrong choice. Now, replace A in this scenario with a machine, and make it C's objective to determine which participant is the machine and which is the person. If this interrogator could be fooled into making the wrong decision 30% of the time, this means the machine at least is in some way intelligent. By the way, the mark is 30%, not 50%. Because 50% would be the same percentage as just totally guessing. And 51% would mean that the machines are actually more human than the humans. But anyways, so this is called the imitation game, which was later in his honor called the Turing Test. So it's pretty cool. It's a fun bit of computing history. But wait, hasn't the Turing Test been passed? I mean, Eugene Goostman and Cleverbot are chatbots that have already fooled far more than 30% of judges just a few years ago. Case closed. Done. Computers can think. Well, so if you know anything about AI or have used these chatbots before, you're probably not ready to jump on the whole computers can think bandwagon just yet. When talking about these types of chatbots, many people think that there are a couple of issues barring them from the thinking club. First off, people cite a basic issue in the programming. Well, I'm sure there are a lot more, advanced algorithms within their code. The structure of their software, basically, is just long lines of if-thens, If a person says hello or hi, just give them a greeting back. Maybe ask how they are. If they ask you your favorite color, say red. If it's your birthday they're asking for, give them that, and just so on. Secondly, these programs employ a slew of other things which could be considered cheap tactics, such as misdirection when they don't have an appropriate response to a question or statement, or in the case of Eugene Goostman, saying that they're a 13-year-old Ukrainian boy, which would allow people to explain some of the odd things said by the chatbots by chalking it up to, oh, he's just a weird young kid from Ukraine. But anyways, even if we say that these cheap tactics are allowed in the Turing Test, which I totally don't think they would be, because Alan Turing was imagining the computer being as mature as an adult, and he actually made an example discussion where they were talking about the finer points of poetry and writing sonnets. But ignoring all that, we can still ask, are they really thinking? This is the question we're given. According to the Turing Test, yes. The test was passed because none of those cheap tactics were really accounted for. But there is another thinker who would oppose the Turing Test. The opposite stance to Turing's comes in the form of the Chinese room, another thought experiment thought up by John Searle in 1980. Searle imagined himself in a room with a box of Chinese characters on paper which he didn't understand, and a large book of instructions which he can. These instructions give appropriate responses to certain sets of Chinese characters. So Chinese speakers on the outside of the room could slide messages under the door. Searle could then look at the instructions and select an appropriate response and slide the response characters back under the door, and they'd make sense. So the people would imagine on the outside that they're speaking to another Chinese speaker. Well, in reality, they're just passing messages back and forth with a man who knows nothing about Chinese characters. So the conclusion to this is that no matter how convincing the charade, you can't ignore the simple fact that Searle didn't understand Chinese. He's just simulating the knowledge. So, again, can computers think? Well, sadly, I don't really think so. In the case of the chatbots, they're given their responses and don't have to do anything but select the appropriate one and send it back. There's no reasoning, no conclusions drawn, no understanding, just an automatically selected response. To take it a step further, I think that because the Turing test is only defined loosely and there are no strict guidelines given by Turing, allowing people to cheat in a few ways, like in the case of Eugene Goosman. So because of this, we really can't use it as a way to tell when computers can think. My reasoning basically is this. Alan Turing, genius though he was, could not have predicted exactly what would happen in the future. I mean, he actually says so if you look at the paper in Computing Machinery and Intelligence. The very last line of the paper is, quote, "We can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there that needs to be done," end quote. People ever since Turing's untimely death have been finding ways to game the Turing test, just so they could be the first people to pass the famed Turing test, and this is actually a quote from the Eugene Goosman website. I mean, let's look at Eugene Goosman actually for a second. Although it is a clever program, at the end of the day, it really is just that. It works by reading from a long list of instructions, and if it can't think of anything to say, it'll try and change the subject and get the person to say something that they have a match for in their set of instructions. And it even uses some of those aforementioned shady tactics to fool people, which probably wouldn't be allowed in the Turing test. So, listen, although the Turing test is an interesting bit of computing history, and there's really no reason why people should not stop attempting to pass it, I don't believe that it will really be a reliable way to tell us when computers can think. It's just a thought experiment, and as kind of disheartened as I am to say this, a flawed one. Alan Turing didn't think people would make as big of a deal about it as they did, and would spend so much of their time trying to find a way to game the test. When computers can think, I think it's going to be fairly evident. I mean, we won't need a formal test to prove it. Rather, I think it's going to be pretty evident to you when you find yourself one day having a fairly complex conversation with your computer about the finer workings of a work of Shakespeare. When the computer has no pre-written responses and are able to form their own opinions, then we will know that they are intelligent. So, that's my opinion on the Turing test. It's very cool. Alan Turing is a great man, but I think the test is a little bit flawed. When you hear claims that so-and-so chatbot has passed the Turing test, does this mean that they're intelligent? Does it mean that they can think? No. Unfortunately, no. The Turing test didn't account for these weird things that people would do to game the test, and I think for that reason, we can't really use it as an accurate measure of anything. Sad as I am to say that, but yeah. So next time you hear that something's passed the Turing test, and you will, trust me, because it happens all the time. Just remember that. If you get anything from the video, just remember that. But yeah. I don't have anything else to say. Again, part 1, I'll put a link to it here. It was the biography of Alan Turing. And part 3, continuing on the Turing theme, is going to be about the Turing machine. Kind of one of his main contribution to computer theory. It's literally the thing that modern computer theory is based on. It's very important, and you can click that right there. So that's all. Thank you for watching, and Deadbeat Dev signing off.